minig is as beret in yene nigla, aber beholle von after as beret da in siddes, da wird ich schaffen zu viel. So I want to start with about the story that the Friedrich Rebbe brings down in the Langer Brief. For those who are not familiar with the Langer Brief was a letter that was written by the Friedrich Rebbe to the Rebbetzin, and it was subsequently published in the Ikras of the Friedrich Rebbe and the Gimel, and it's also been translated into English a number of years ago. I think it was actually the first of the work of the Friedrich Rebbe, with the exception of the Maimorim, that were really published in English. So it's quite a monumental work. So what I want to do is I want to bring a story and see if we can have some insight into the story based on a hesper that I once heard from one of my mashpim from a Maimer. So the story goes that in the Langer Brief, the Friedrich Rebbe is speaking about the way that the Chassidim evolved, how they evolved from being in a state of being a snagid, and slowly but surely becoming closer and closer to the ways of Chassidus. And Friedrich Rebbe there tells a story of one particular individual whose name was Reb Mordechai. And he tells the story of this Reb Mordechai, how it was that gradually he comes closer to the Torah of Hashem, and eventually he becomes a tremendous chassid. So one of the interesting things that he tells is Reb Mordechai tells over the way that he used to daven. What was his approach to tefillah? So he tells the Gavaldic story the way that he would do it, and it's just very interesting. So he says, Reb Mordechai sollen sich erwecken die Iras HaReimus von Kudsha Brichu, in order that he should be able to awaken within himself the intense fear of the Ribono Shel Olam, as soll wissen, als geht Misparo sein zu dem Kudsha Brichu, vielleicht zugehen zu dem Omud und überlehnen die Größe Oisies, was dort ist ausgeschrieben, Dalif Nehmiata Oimen. So he would go to the Ständer, he would see it says these words, Dalif Nehmiata Oimen. He would read the words, and then he says, when he would close his eyes, and then and then he would try to picture in his mind a gestalt von a moiredike greise chaya wie a greise buffalo. He says he would try to picture in his mind how a raging buffalo is coming towards him, and he goes on to describe, for those who are not familiar what a buffalo is, you can ask a local South African what it is. And what then happens is he says that when at that point in time is he would be absolutely shimmering with fear. So he goes on to describe how he would be thinking, and the tremendous fear that he was had. And then he goes, and when he's pictured the Eibishter like this raging buffalo, it's like clear as day in his head, like from them Omud to sein Ort, he would go away from the Omud where he would be where he was picturing this apparition, and then he would go and daven. And this is the story that the Friedrich Rebbe brings down about the Reb Mordechai. And you look back at it years later, and he pushed it amongst many of the other anhogis that he had. This was one of the ones that he wasn't too fond of. But the question is, what is Taka, the approach? What is the way that a person is really supposed to go? How should a person really approach this idea of really awakening in oneself a feeling of pachad, of ema, of yira, or becoming over here a feeling of ava, all of these kinds of experiences. So in order to understand this a little bit, what I want to do is I want to go into a little bit into an inyan that the Rebbe Rashab explains in the Hemshech HaYedua of Shua Samachay. And in the second Maimer, Al-Min Tidam Yuni, the Rebbe Rashab goes on to speak about the Indian, of course, the whole Hemshech of Samachay is speaking about the Indian of Ischadshus, but he goes on to speak about the Indian of Ilah V'Olol. For those that don't know, Ilah V'Olol is, I once heard from Yossi Paltiel, he once said, is very badly translated as cause and effect. It's one cause leads to another result, another effect. And Bichlal and Chassidus, it speaks about the fact that there's two inyonim in Ilah V'Olol. The one inyon in Ilah V'Olol is inyon of what the Chassidim call the inyon of Ispaskos, which is basically the idea of development. So the concept is that one inyon is already contained within the other, and all that you really are doing is revealing that which is already there. So, for example, if you've got a Rav, an emissary Rav, and he's coming to teach a Talmud, so what he does is, by teaching the Talmud, he's megala the Seichel HaTalmud that was really Talmud, was already there previously in the Seichel HaRav. And what he does is he develops that out, and therefore the cause is the Seichel HaRav, and what's coming out is the Seichel HaTalmud, and this is the cause and effect that you have over there. This is one idea. They both are Seichel, but just the one is a slightly developed Seichel, or watered down Seichel perhaps, from that which the Rav had. The second explanation that brings in Chassidus, and this is the focus of the Maimon in Samachay, and this is that Ilah V'Olol was two completely different entities. They really are very, very, very different, just that the one is machayev the other. So for example, if you've got a svara, so you've got a Rav who sits down and he wants to paskin a shayla. So what he does is good durchtrachten. He has to think through all the various logical debates that he has. He goes through all the svaras, and at the end he comes to a psak. But when you come to the psak, is it mutter or is it osur? Is it tomei or is it toy? By him, this is what is left with over there is not the seichel. What is left with over here is what the seichel was machayev, a new entity, something that is different to that which the seichel really was when it began. And the same thing, according to the Maimer over here, is when it comes to seichel and midas. Seichel and midas are two worlds apart. And so much are they two worlds apart that the one is an intellectual entity, the other one is an emotional entity, and the two are very, very distinct and very different. The only thing is that the seichel is machayev the midas. I once heard from Zalman, he told a story. He once said that it actually took place in the time of when the Rebbe Rashab was saying this Hemshech Samachay. He went to see, the way that he used to call it when I was in yeshiva, HaProfessor Hanoida, the well-known professor. That subsequently came out that this professor was actually Freud. But what ended up happening was that when he went to the professor, he sat over there and the professor asked him, what is Chassidus? And the Rebbe Rashab turned to him and he said to him something to the effect that Chassidus teaches and how a person can have moyach shalit al alev. And how one's intellect can rule over the emotional domain. And the professor turned to the Rebbe Rashab and he said, it's umegla, it's impossible. Because the seichel and midas are two completely different worlds. You can't have one that is going to be encroaching on the other. So, by the end of today, we might have some kind of understanding as to the way that Rebbe Rashab answered the professor at the time. But before we get there, let's go into a little bit, is what is the difference between the inyan of seichel and midas? And by the way, after this explanation that I'm going to be giving again, this is Meyusad on something that I heard many years ago from one of my mashpim, from Zalman Gopin. What you'll be able to understand is to take this inyan and then go back and hopefully take a look at the Maimer and see the way that it brings the Maimer over there and the Cholah on the first Maimer really brings it to light. So what's the inyan of seichel? So the inyan of seichel is a concept which is independent. What that means when it's something which is independent, it means that it's an inyan, it's something which is about itself. It's nothing that mixes in the person. Midas, on the other hand, is about the ani, it's about the me, it's about me loving, me having fear, me being merciful, me being kind. This is what midas is all about, as opposed to seichel, which is about being very, very objective. In fact, you can even argue that if a person comes along and mixes in his feelings into a seichel, then what this does is, it takes away from the seichel. You don't want somebody mixing in all his own intellect, his own feelings, his own experiences, his own emotions into understanding something. Because that takes away what the seichel is all about. Seichel has to be something which is unbiased, and cannot be impacted by anything besides for the true cold seichel for what it really is. Now, in seichel itself, you can speak about a number of different madrigas. You can speak about one inyan, which is the inyan of pnimius seichel, and then you can speak about an inyan of chitzonius seichel. According to the hemshach over there, what's the chiluk between these two madrigas? So the inyan of pnimius seichel is when a person is coming and he learns a ruchniistic concept and he grapples with the concept, and at the end he grasps the concept clearly, he knows it, he understands it. The inyan lach by him in a pnimius, this is the way that it is. This is the seichel. So for example, let's say a person he goes to study architecture. So when he goes to study the architecture or anything like that, what he does is, or an engineer. So he comes and he's busy learning all about the ways that a building is built. How you've got different floors, and how the arches have to be, and how the floor has to be in relation to the ceiling of the next floor. He's got all the seichel mamish. He learns it. He's got it down pat, and he knows it through and through. After that, what he does is on his way home, he walks by a building. He goes, wow, take a look at this building. What a beautiful building. This is a book, and he starts appreciating suddenly what the building is. This building is good for that reason. This is a beautiful building. This is a well-constructed building. Suddenly what happens is he starts appreciating a little bit about the building based on the fact that he had some kind of seichel that he had learned previously. So he's really moved one step further from where he was before. When he started off, he was just understanding in concept what the building was all about. What he then goes afterwards is he takes it deeper, and he comes to try and understand what it is that really makes this building special, and what a beautiful building, what a pretty building. And this is the development of how it is that a person comes to understand and appreciate something. Now, when we take the concept on a ruchniistic level, a person comes and he goes through the same steps. He understands something, he contemplates something, and he contemplates ruchnius, he contemplates about the Eibishter. And once he's finished his whole contemplation, and he's finished his whole erudite understanding, and he's gotten to the bottom of the concept, what does he then come and understand? Wow, you know what? Elikus is a gute Sache. Elikus is a süße Sache. It's because, you know, elikus is something that's good, it's something that's sweet, it's something that's valuable. What he's now done is he's taken that concept that he learned and he brought that down into the chitzonius seichel that was, he came to understand something about the Eibishter, but something, to use the lashon of the pasuk, that he comes to understand that elikus is something which is a dover toy, something that is good. And so this is the first madrega that he comes to understand. Kirvas elikim is toy. To be close to the Eibishter is something that is good. And this is the first madrega that he comes to after he's taking this seichel down. So the MS, what we can see over here is, first he has the seichel the way that he's understood it. Then he's taken the concept and understood that this is something that is good. And now he comes to what Chassidus calls a spider sichlis. He has some kind of a true, he's moved by this concept intellectually that this is something that is good and something that is fine. But the question is, what is the difference between this madrega, where he's intellectually understands something that is good and something that's fine, something that is wonderful, to a madrega where he comes along and says, he's spilus, he's been moved, he's motivated, he's changed. What's the difference? So, B'kitzur, the difference that you have is when a person comes in, becomes moved, is anxious in midas, what lands up is he's drawn, he himself is drawn towards something. He understands that this thing that he's drawn to is something that is valuable, something that is good, but one big difference that he has is he understands that it's something which is good for him. Kirvas Elokim li tov. So what he's now done is he's moved it down to another madrega. Not only does he understand what this concept of elikos is, not only does he understand that this concept is good, but now what he's come along is he's come to understand that kibbas elikim lito is something which is good for me. And once he's understood that that thing is good for him, and he really appreciates it, now he can come along and have a feeling of ava, or maybe a feeling of yira, and this is the madrega that he comes in order to be megala, this feeling that he truly has. However, there's one step that is missing over here, and that is, how do you get from being to the step of saying that something is good to something that is good for me? So what you've got to have in between over there is you've got to have what's called in Chassidus a b'chein. So what the b'chein is basically like they say, you would say in Lashon Kodesh, you'd come along and you'd say, okay, I understand that kibbas elikim is toy. I understand that it goes as a dover yofe. I understand maybe it's something which is I have to be scared of. I understand all these things. And therefore, and so what's the answer? The answer is, what ends up happening is, kibbas elikim li tov. That's when he comes to understand that it's not just Amazon, it's like but what happens is it moves to the realm of the heart, that it's something which applies to me. In other words, essentially the difference between the seichel over here and the midas, the way that it is in the heart, is the one is a completely and totally intellectual pursuit, and the other one is a completely and totally emotional pursuit. So quite well, we explained it over here now. The way that the Rebbe Rashab is masbir this is that there's 5 distinct madregas. You got the pnimius haseichel, you got the chitzonius haseichel, then what you got from the chitzonius haseichel, you come to the spilus sichlis, then what you come to is you come to the b'chein, and after you come to that b'chein, you come to the iskalus of the midas. And this is the seder, how it works when you megala midas. The truth of the matter is that there's one other level that comes, without getting too much into the pratim over here, before the b'chein and after the spilus sichlis, and this is something that is called the Meitzer HaGoren. And what is the Meitzer HaGoren? The Meitzer HaGoren is an entity that is about transforming the world of seichel into the world of midas. This is what the Meitzer HaGoren does. It's about, but it uses the Lashon of Chassidus, an experience of shloimamus. What lands up happening is the seichel vanishes, and all that you're left with you're left with the midas. So to use the Lashon of the Mitzvah Rebbe, that what you have over here is you got the progression in seichel, when you got the pnimius seichel and the chitzonius seichel. What you got in the chitzonius seichel that leads to the spilus sichlis is really what this is it's the way that he calls it is this is the midas sheba seichel, or the seichel sheba midas sheba seichel. And then what you've got that comes after the b'chein, what you end up happening over there is that b'chein that is causing the actual iskalus midas is going to be a level of the seichel sheba midas sheba leiv. This is the way that you end up having the distinction between these madregas. So these 5 madregas are really responsible, so to speak, for the progression of something in a world of seichel that it turns into a midah. In the Maimer over there, in the Maimer of Almita Tadam Yuni, the Rebbe Rashab goes on then to explain how it happens and why it happens that something can be transformed from seichel into midas. How it happens, does it happen automatically or does it not happen automatically? And the Nakuda, what the Rebbe Rashab explains over there is, in order to sit down and to daven, there has to be a achona. The achona has to be filled with a person has to learn the siddhis first. V'chulu, you can see over there in the Maimer. But Nachsan in Yoneinu, what we can see from all of this is that the process of developing a true midah, emerson midah, is one that takes a lot of, it's a detailed process. And it's something that doesn't happen, that is vaping, that is just going to be very superficial, but it comes about a person really developing the midas, and this is the concept of Ilav Olu, the way that the Rebbe Rashab explains it in the Hemshech in Samachay. A good way.
I just wanted to remind everybody that Simchas HaChag is going on.